Carla, for that warm introduction. We're really grateful to be here today, actually. The World Trade Center Delaware is one of our Making Global Local partners, and really one of the key partners that we have in the U.S. To do outreach to U.S. businesses, so we really are grateful to be here. And then in addition to that, I'd like to echo Biova's points about the upcoming event in July. We are actually from USTDA sending our executive leadership to that event as well. We've attended the past summits, and they've been really helpful for us in terms of our own business development of where we can see grant funding opportunities to work with U.S. partners, to work with African partners, and in addition to that, in terms of connecting with financiers. So I'm going to talk a bit about that. So USTDA, the U.S. Trade and Development Agency, we're an independent agency of the U.S. government. Our mission, our focus is similar to our name suggests. So we're focused on trade, so supporting U.S. exports to overseas markets, but also development. So our funding is foreign assistance funds. We're focused on projects that have positive development impacts. And we also only work in emerging economies and emerging markets. Sub-Saharan Africa is one of our largest portfolios, so I'm excited to talk to you about some of our projects there. USTDA, we work in project development, which means we work at the stage of like pre-feasibility study, really typically up until financial close. So, if you have an idea to do like airport infrastructure upgrades or, building like small power plants, like I heard a previous speaker talk about small hydro opportunities. We can fund the planning work for that to help get it ready for bankability and get that project ready to go to investors. One other thing that's mentioned here is we fund pilot projects, which is something I think that's really useful to U.S. businesses. We do not fund equipment. We basically fund the labor for the development of a project, but we work frequently with U.S. companies that have like an innovative solution or a technology that they would like to pilot to demonstrate how it works in a particular country. So for example, we worked with a smart meter manufacturer in the US who wanted to work with the Port Harcourt electricity distribution utility to roll that out. And so we did like a pilot program with them and also worked with the regulator, the electricity regulator, to demonstrate how their technology could be utilized in that distribution utility, but also as a way to like help enter the market and connect with all of the utilities across Nigeria. So I think it's a really good entree into certain markets. We also do partnership building. This is sort of the other side of the coin of what we fund, where we fund reverse trade missions, which is basically where we bring over buyers from African markets to the United States. So actually starting next week, we are planning a reverse trade mission focused on ports from Cote d'Ivoire. So happy to talk to you about that if anyone's interested in hearing more. We'll be bringing a delegation to the United States to meet with companies for that. In addition, we also fund workshops and conferences. So we're doing quite a bit in the ICT sector, for example, and so we've done a series of 5G regulatory workshops globally. So if there's any interest on sort of like policy workshops that can help open up particular markets, I think that's something that we're happy to discuss concepts and ideas for. We tend to work in 5 key sectors. In Sub-Saharan Africa, actually, ICT is our largest. Energy is very close behind it, and our second largest. And I think energy really took off for us in terms of our portfolio under Power Africa. We do a lot of work in support of Power Africa. And then ICT, we've just seen a lot of growing interest from US industry to be doing more in terms of digital infrastructure. Transportation is another strong sector for us, really globally. I would say within that, aviation is probably the top, then freight rail, then ports like smart ports, IT. I would say healthcare is probably our next strongest sector, really growing sector for us in Sub-Saharan Africa in particular. Like for example, just a few months ago, we funded an activity to support SAPRA, which is the regulatory agency in South Africa, really look at how their processes can actually meet WHO and USFDA standards for medical devices and pharmaceuticals. And so really focusing on like quality, safety, efficacy. I think that's something we're trying to do more when we look at one-off opportunities in healthcare and sort of how we can take a more holistic approach, bringing that all together. So that's a growing sector for us. And agriculture as well, we work in. We have really strong results. I mean, we're really focused on, again, trade and development, but our trade results are here, which is for every dollar we spend. The work that comes after our engagement, there's a return of $117 of US exports for every dollar we spend. So that's not even like the capital requirements, that's just the exports. We don't expect that for every project. So for example, if we're working on like a small hydro project or a small solar project versus an aviation project, they're gonna have different returns. But I think this is just indicative of some of the success that we've seen. And we have a really strong track record. We've supported over 4,000 infrastructure activities. We work in 139 countries globally, and we've helped facilitate quite a few exports as well. Just so you know, I mean, I think one of the goals for me from this meeting today is I want to hear from you if you have project ideas, and just a couple key things to keep in mind. The sectors we already covered where we tend to work, but also our grant structure is USTDA. We provide grants to entities in Africa, so that can be the government, it can be private sector entities, and then US companies do the work we fund. So you could bring an opportunity to us as a US company, you can bring an opportunity to us as an African entity. Typically, if you're bringing an opportunity to us as a US company, we call this sole source, because we're foregoing that opportunity for other US companies to compete on that activity. We generally will share costs with you. We'll share the risk of this upfront work. So for example, like I was talking about pilot projects, because we don't fund equipment, you would probably provide that equipment, and that would be your cost share. And then we would provide grant funding for the study or parts of the study. So that's sort of how we would work together. Another question that's asked a lot is time frame. Working with the US government or other entities, I think there's always a lot of question about like what's the time to get funding. I would say it typically takes about from an actionable proposal to being able to spend funding. It can take anywhere, I would say, probably about 6 months, but maybe 3 months to get to approval if everything's moving forward smoothly. I think what makes projects move more quickly is when we're able to address a lot of the risks and barriers to that project, because as a grant funding agency, we're really focused on if we come in and provide project development funding, will this project move forward to implementation? What are the risks? And so that gets to these questions like, is it likely to be financed? Who are you talking to in terms of financiers? We actually have an extensive list of financier contacts and MOUs with specific financiers as well that we're happy to connect you with, because we like to engage them early to make sure in our study that we're addressing their requirements, whether it's for certain standards for environmental and social impact assessments or other standards that they might have as unique financiers. In terms of our ticket size, that generally ranges between $500,000 and $1.5 million that we'll put into an activity. As I mentioned, grantees, like our grant recipients and our beneficiaries, are overseas entities, so they can be public or private sector entities. And then US firms do the work that we fund. So we actually will pay the US company directly for milestones as they're doing that work. And both US companies and African entities can bring projects to us. So happy to have conversations on that. And again, our grants cover labor, not equipment. Just a couple of examples just to run through that we've done recently. The first one is a project we did in Nigeria, and it actually is building off of our full mini-grid, off-grid portfolio that we have there. We're supporting an entity called SOSI Renewable, and really we're looking at a project that will support probably up to 20 megawatts of solar power for around 200,000 women, farmers, and rural citizens in Kogi, Plateau, and Kaduna states. And so that actually builds off of our existing mini grid portfolio that we have in Nigeria, which is really focused on supporting energy access for more than 66,000 households. So we have a really robust portfolio there in off-grid, actually across Sub-Saharan Africa. So if you're interested in that, happy to talk about that. In Kenya, we also recently signed a grant to support Wingu Networks, which is a partner with Microsoft, other US companies, and we're helping support them as an ISP, look at expansion across the region and how to expand their model, and really provide connectivity to the region. We've done something similar recently with CCOM to help support them in reaching enterprise customers in East Africa. So we do a lot of projects like that in energy and ICT, which again are probably our strongest sectors. Again, I think how to work with us. If you have an idea for a project, I think the key things that we want to understand are the risks to that project. So I'd be really interested in seeing if you have feasibility studies or design projects or technical assistance work that you need, and understanding sort of the vision for how that project will be implemented on the back end. So like what's the projected CapEx, who are the key partners that will be involved in that project, are you already talking to like potential equity sources, if not, like, could we put you in touch, sort of what's your vision and timeline for that project. We'll like to have a lot of conversations about that upfront before putting funding into an activity. And also if you have concepts for like workshops or reverse trade missions, if you're experiencing like a policy or a regulatory issue in a certain country that you think other US companies are also experiencing and you would like addressed, we can potentially do a workshop, which I think is helpful from a government to government perspective to like have that conversation of like what we're hearing from US industry, what we're hearing from African industry in terms of like how to address and facilitate like regulatory processes. So happy to hear your concepts for that, and happy to talk to you further about that. Thank you for listening.